My bestie just divorced her hubby, and her life has taken an unexpected turn. I want to take her out, but my spouse would not allow me. My 40-year-old closest friend, 38, is divorcing her 44-year-old spouse. Let's name them Alice and Ken. My husband, a 37-year-old man, and I have been together for 10 years and have always been close to Ken and Alice. Alice and I have been friends since before we met our spouses. We met at college. We shared dorm rooms and had several late-night study sessions that transformed into profound chats and laughing. We supported each other through difficult breakups, celebrated each other's accomplishments, and even traveled together before life became complex with jobs and children. Alice was my maid of honor, while I was hers. Our friendship has always remained unshakable. My spouse and Ken have also become excellent friends over the years. They first became friends because of their mutual love of athletics, but they rapidly discovered other similar interests. Ken, a craftsman who has a metal business on their property, and my husband, is a tech enthusiast who enjoys tinkering with devices. We frequently spend hours at Ken's store, enjoying drinks and telling stories about business and life. They spend time together on a semi-regular basis, doing anything from fishing to assisting each other with home improvement tasks. Alice has a daughter, a bright 12-year-old from her previous relationship, who has joined our extended family. Ken had been her father since she was 4, and he clearly cherished her as his own. My spouse and I have always treated her like she was a niece. We routinely include her in our trips and holiday celebrations. Ken told Alice about a month ago that he wanted a divorce. Alice was distraught when she told me, and I could see it in her eyes. She admitted that their marriage had been strained for the past 6 months. According to her, the problem came from Ken's problems at her employment. Alice earned a promotion at her work 3 years ago, which meant taking on new duties. This advancement prompted her to travel 3 to 4 months every year even, though she worked a lot. Late nights, early mornings, and weekends. It seems that she was always on the clock. She's always been incredibly ambitious and successful, ascending the corporate ladder with unwavering tenacity that I've admired for years. Ken, on the other hand, is an experienced tradesman. He works full-time from his metal shop on their property. His work is also tough, but in a different way. He remains busy with projects, clients, and running his own business. However, I would not call her the breadwinner. They both made considerable contributions to their home, but the balance had altered. Alice informed me that Ken had become increasingly outspoken about his discontent with her employment. He felt ignored, as if his relationship had taken a backseat to her profession. He had urged her several times to either take a position with less travel and responsibilities or find a new career entirely. She had always vowed to think about it, but had been putting it off, thinking he would ultimately drop the matter. This continual disagreement produced a schism between them, which grew over time. The problem escalated when Alice prolonged a work trip without informing Ken. She had forgotten about the family vacation they had planned for when she returned. Ken thought her priorities were apparent, and he felt pushed aside. When she returned home after her lengthy trip, she discovered that Ken had packed his stuff and relocated the majority of his shop and tools into storage. He hadn't given her any clue that he was about to depart, acting as if everything was good until that point. She phoned me. When I answered the phone, Alice was devastated. She continued insisting, "I don't think he'd do it over and over." When Ken made it plain that they would never be able to reconcile, her despair immediately turned to rage. He had reached his limit, believing that Alice had abandoned their relationship ever since she got the new post. He claimed they no longer spent time together as a family, that Alice did not make time for them to communicate when she traveled, and that she emphasized socializing with coworkers over him. Their sexual life had reduced to nothing. Every time he expressed his worries, she dismissed him. Ken's hatred had been growing for a long time, and the protracted business trip was the final straw. He felt overlooked, unloved, and underappreciated. Alice's drive and achievement, which had brought them together, were now pulling them apart. Alice's pleasure was palpable when she told me all of this. She was caught between her enthusiasm for her job and her failing marriage. She did not want to pick between them. But it seems like Ken had already made the decision for her. Everything got considerably worse following a particular occurrence that is difficult to mention without shuddering. Ken and Alice had been separated for around 3 weeks. Their daughter was going back and forth between Ken's apartment and their old house, where Alice resided. It was Ken's weekend with their daughter, and he usually returned her on Sunday evenings. Alice was on a bender and completely forgot what day it was since she was so inebriated. She assumed it was Saturday, but it was actually Sunday. Ken arrives with their kid and walks in on a whole crap show. Alice had 2 younger males present. They were inebriated and in the hot tub. They weren't in the act, but it was obvious what was going on. The situation was chaotic. Empty bottles were spilled around, clothing were tossed indiscriminately, and Alice, plainly inebriated, was hardly conscious. When Ken stepped in, Alice began to stress out. She started calling Ken names and screamed that it wasn't Sunday yet. Her speech was slurred, and her movements were unstable. The younger males were uneasy and began packing their belongings to depart. Ken, attempting to maintain his cool, swiftly took his daughter back to his van so she did not witness the worst of it. He was outraged, but he remained cool for their daughter's sake. Alice's fury did not end. She kept hurling insults and accusations, fully unaware of the current day. Ken was able to get their daughter out of there without her seeing too much, but the harm had been done. Alice couldn't remember what had happened the next day. She awoke with a hangover and blurry memories from the night before. She had sent Ken some awful things when she was fucked up. The communications were filthy, containing very personal and insulting insults. Ken presented them to my husband, who later showed them to me. I won't repeat what they said verbatim, but it was really personal. Things that have a lasting impact and are difficult to forget. Alice's inebriated messages accused Ken of being a loser who never loved her, and she even made disparaging remarks about his masculinity. It was as if all of her pent-up hatred and anguish had been released in a storm of caustic remarks. Seeing those letters caused my heart to throb. This was not the Alice I knew. She was in a downward spiral, which was impacting everyone around her. The experience marked a turning moment for Ken. He resolved to go all out and take her to the cleaners. He wanted the house, complete custody of their daughter, and child support. He wasn't just furious. He was finished. Alice was devastated when she realized what she had done. She attempted to apologize, but the harm was irreversible. Ken was convinced there was no turning back. Their daughter, caught in the midst of the commotion, began to prefer being with Ken because she felt more solid and comfortable with him. I know this is not Alice. She's going through hell. She needs friends right now, and I am practically all she has. Alice's actions that night reflected her inner struggle. A desperate scream for aid disguised by booze and poor choices. It was a moment of weakness with far-reaching consequences for everyone concerned. Her own daughter would want to stay with Ken. I'm not going to alienate my closest buddy over this. What's the issue? My spouse wants me to cut her out. He spoke some quite negative things about her. He's dubbed her a bad mother. I know she adores her daughter. He called her a self-centered effing bee. He claims he doesn't want me to get caught up in her drama and conduct. Every time I argue that she will turn it around and only needs help right now, he shuts me down, claiming that this is who she truly is and that he does not understand why I want to connect with people like her. I know a lot of this is simply St. Ken has told him, and he is protecting his friend. They've been close for years, and I understand. He is loyal to Ken. But it is different for me. Alice and I have a long history together, dating back before we met our spouses. I'm not justifying her actions, but I don't believe it's realistic for him to want me to remove my closest friend out of my life completely. Alice has asked me out a couple times recently. She's lonely and going through a difficult period. I went once without informing my husband because I knew what he'd say, and honestly, all I wanted to do was talk to her in person and see if I could assist her in any way. When I eventually informed him we had met up, he went crazy. He accused me of concealing information from him, which I did, but only because I knew he would not comprehend. He said that if I didn't cut her out, we'd have problems too. It's like he's drawing a line in the sand, and I'm caught in the midst. On one side is my spouse, who has been my rock for the past 10 years, and with whom I share my life. On the opposite side is Alice, my best friend who is like a sister to me. Cutting her out feels like betraying a piece of me, a part of my past, and all we've gone through. Update: this is not a happy update. Alice and I agreed to meet on Saturday morning. I intended to bring coffee and help her with some housework before her business trip on Monday. My intention was to communicate her family's and my combined care for her well-being, and to let her know that we all want her to be happy, even if her recent conduct has been disturbing. I hoped we could have a genuine talk. That I'd reconnect with the buddy I remembered, and that she'd agree to try treatment, and that she will begin to move in a favorable path. None of that occurred. She was confrontational from the moment. I arrived at her house, almost as if she knew what my goals were before I said anything. Her guarded stance and brusque tone were clear red flags. When I informed her I was worried about her, she dismissed my concerns, stating that she was okay and simply having fun. She stated that after all of her hard work, she deserved to relax, especially now that Ken had left her. Her defiance was evident. She discussed Ken's lack of gratitude throughout the years, despite all of her hard work and financial assistance. She recounted all she had paid for and done for him, portraying herself as the martyr in their relationship. It made me wince to hear her say this since it was so out of character. She had always been the strong and independent one. But suddenly it seems like she was changing their history to fit her story. For the record, Ken is a hardworking man who did not need her money. He was the breadwinner when they initially got acquainted. As Alice moved up the corporate ladder, I was there to assist her. While she currently earns far more than he does, he was never financially reliant on her. They have always maintained a partnership built on mutual respect and shared responsibility. Listening to her, it was evident that she was attempting to justify her recent actions by portraying herself as a victim who had been taken for granted. But I knew better. Ken had been at her side through thick and thin, encouraging her to achieve her professional goals. Her present viewpoint was warped by the anguish and rage of their breakup. Alice's demeanor did not change when I attempted to reason with her. Every attempt I made to redirect the subject to her well-being was met with further explanations for her conduct. She said that she was simply having fun, and that she deserved it after everything she had gone through. She seemed to be trying to convince herself as much as she was convincing me. Her confrontational demeanor had me at a loss. Some of my pals pointed out that Alice was probably cheating on Ken. I questioned her about it. She became highly protective, her cheeks flushed with a combination of rage and hurt. She gave me the entire "I can't believe you'd even ask me that" attitude, her voice rising in outrage. Her reaction was swift and severe, as if the mere mention was an irreparable betrayal on my behalf. I reminded her about the hot tub incident and how horrible things looked. I painted the painting again. Ken walks in with their daughter when she is in the hot tub with two younger men who are clearly inebriated. The scenario had controversy written all over it. But Alice dismissed it, claiming she had never cheated. She asserted that nothing untoward had occurred, and that it was simply a night of harmless fun. When I questioned her on who the guys were, she acknowledged they were interns at her firm. Her revelation was met with a casual shrug, as if it wasn't a big deal. I could feel my stomach flip when I inquired how old they were. How did she respond? They were legal. The way she said it made me shiver. A chilly and disdainful tone, as if spoken by a nasty old guy regarding younger ladies. It was filthy and uncomfortable. Her flippant attitude didn't set well with me. I could tell she was attempting to minimize the whole issue, dismissing it as insignificant. But the casualness with which she alluded to these interns, combined with the scenario Ken had stumbled into, presented a disturbing picture. I couldn't ignore the sensation that there was more to the tale than she was revealing. I'm not sure whether she was cheating before the split. I don't know much about this woman anymore. The person I'd known for years, who was previously dependable and grounded, suddenly seemed like a stranger. Her behavior, words, and whole manner were so different from the Alice I used to know. It was as if she had changed completely into someone I couldn't recognize or comprehend. This entire incident had left me in a tough situation. I wanted to encourage her and help her get through this difficult time, but her actions made it harder. This is when things took a surprising turn. As we talked, she was preparing for a work trip. I inquired where she was heading this time. She mentioned Dallas. I didn't think much of it. She has traveled to Dallas for business hundreds of times. What struck me as weird was what she was carrying. Long trousers, sweaters, beanies, coats, and hiking boots. It was all fall gear, which she wouldn't wear in Dallas at this time of year. Her outfit choice made little sense given the warm temperature in Dallas. I don't think I saw her pack her work clothes. This was even more perplexing given the aim of her journey. But what's the oddest thing? A random Seattle Mariners jersey. Alice does not follow baseball. She never has. Seeing the jersey among her belongings set my thoughts racing with questions. Why would she need a baseball jersey during a business trip to Dallas? The more I thought about it, the odder it appeared. I wanted to ask her about it and get to the bottom of this strange packing list, but I kept my questions to myself. I did not want to appear invasive or accusing, especially given how defensive she had become recently. Despite my rising discomfort, I attempted to remain upbeat. Alice appeared absorbed with her packing, her motions quick and almost frenzied. Her kid was about to arrive, adding to the air of urgency in the room. I decided to leave her to it since I didn't want to add to her stress. We hugged before I went. I told her that I loved her and wanted her to be happy. I reiterated that I hoped she would consider visiting a therapist after she returned from her trip. She looked at me with a mix of emotions and said, "I'll think about it." It was a small concession, but I clung to it, hoping it might lead to something positive. As I walked out the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The bizarre packing choices, the evasive answers, everything felt wrong. But I didn't push it. I wanted to trust that Alice knew what she was doing, even though my gut told me otherwise. When I got home, hubby and I sat down to talk about how things went with Alice. I told him about the clothes she was packing: long pants, sweatshirts, a beanie, jackets, and hiking boots, and the random Seattle Mariners jersey. He thought it was odd, too. We both found it strange, but other than it just being odd, we didn't think much of it at the time. But then, hubby went full internet detective. He was determined to figure out what was going on. After a bit of searching, he discovered something that made my heart sink. Guess who lives in Seattle and has a Facebook profile picture of himself at a Mariners game. Her daughter's biological father. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. When I checked the Mariners' schedule, they did have home games next week. I called Alice immediately, my hands trembling as I dialed her number. When she picked up, I tried to keep my voice steady. Are you really going to Dallas? I inquired, and she replied casually, yeah. Why? I took a deep breath and pressed on. Are you certain you won't encounter her ex in Seattle? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Probably a full minute of silence that felt like an eternity. I could feel the tension mounting. Alice, you better not lie to me. I'll find out, I warned her. Finally, she came clean. She admitted that she had gotten in contact with him right after Ken left her, and that they'd been talking more and more. She claimed he was a different man now, that he had turned his life around. She launched into a spiel about how he had changed, how he was more responsible and stable now, how he wanted to be a part of his daughter's life again. But all I heard was blah blah. I was furious and heartbroken. This man had caused her so much pain in the past, and now she was letting him back into her life. After everything she had been through with Ken, the last thing she needed was to get involved with someone who had hurt her so deeply before. The fact that she had lied to me, that she had planned this whole trip under false pretenses, made it even worse. I didn't know what to say. I was filled with a mix of anger, disappointment, and fear for what this could mean for her and her daughter. I didn't talk about her baby daddy in the last post because it wasn't relevant. But just know this man is a piece of shit human being. He cheated on her while she was pregnant and kicked her out when she confronted him. He'd slap her around, call her terrible names, and degrade her in ways that no one should ever have to endure. This effing guy even had the audacity to say he wanted nothing to do with their child. When Alice finally reached out to me, desperate and broken, I didn't hesitate. I flew to Seattle, picked her up, and brought her home. She stayed with me for a bit, trying to piece her life back together. Those days were tough. Alice was a shell of herself, dealing with the trauma of abuse and the daunting task of raising a newborn alone. But Alice, being the resilient woman she is, slowly started to rebuild. She found strength in her daughter, who became her beacon of hope. Not long after moving in with me, she met Ken. He was a breath of fresh air, a kind, hard-working man who treated her with the respect and love she so desperately needed. Within a year of dating, they moved in together, and Ken embraced the role of a father to her daughter with open arms. He provided stability and affection, something Alice hadn't experienced in a long time. Ken was there for the milestones, her daughter's first steps, first words, and first day of school. He was the one who stayed up all night when she had a fever, who taught her how to ride a bike, who read her bedtime stories. In every sense that mattered, he was her father. Their little family seemed perfect, a stark contrast to the nightmare Alice had escaped. Thinking back to those days, it's painful to see how far things have fallen apart. Alice went from being in a loving, supportive relationship to the mess she's in now. The memory of what she went through with her baby daddy only makes her current choices more baffling and worrisome. She knows firsthand the kind of person he is, yet she's letting him back into her life. It's like watching her walk back into a burning building. The thought of her daughter potentially being exposed to that man again is unbearable. She deserves better. Alice deserves better. But she's so lost right now, so blinded by her pain and confusion, that she can't see it. It's like she's forgotten the horrors of her past and is willing to risk everything for a man who never deserved a second chance. All of this makes me fear for her even more. I told her that of all the shit she's pulled recently, this was by far the worst thing she could do. My voice was shaking with anger and disappointment as I laid it out for her. I couldn't believe she would ever speak to that man, after what he did to her and how he treated her. She kept saying it was years ago, that he had changed, and that he wanted to meet his daughter one day. But that didn't matter to me. The scars he left, both physical and emotional, were still fresh in my mind, even if she chose to forget them. When she said he wanted to meet his daughter, something inside me snapped. I started screaming and yelling into the phone so loud I think I blew out my voice. Are you out of your mind? After everything he did to you, to us, you're going to let him back into your life? Into your daughter's life? I was beyond furious, my anger fueled by years of witnessing her pain and suffering because of that man. I told her I was done with her. I told her if she gets on that plane to Seattle, to not bother contacting me ever again. I hung up on her. She called back and texted once, but I ignored it. I didn't have the energy for her anymore. I just sat on the couch crying all night while my husband held me. He didn't rub it in. He didn't give me an attitude. He just let me cry and told me he was sorry. Sorry that my best friend was making such destructive choices. Sorry that I was caught in the middle of this mess. I felt completely drained, emotionally and physically. The weight of my words and the finality of what I had said hung heavy in the air. This was the woman who had been my confidant, my rock, my sister in every way that mattered. And now, I was watching her walk down a path that I knew would lead to nothing but more heartache and devastation. The realization that I might have lost her for good was almost too much to bear. I couldn't understand how she could be so blind, so willing to rewrite history for a man who had only brought her pain. The memories of helping her rebuild her life, of watching her grow stronger and more independent, now seemed distant and futile. It was like all the progress she had made was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. My husband's arms around me were the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. Alice texted me this morning. She said she was sorry for lying to me, but that she's a big girl now and can look after herself. Her words were a slap in the face, a dismissive wave of her hand as she brushed off my concerns and our history. It was as if everything we had been through together, all the support I had given her, meant nothing. Her stubborn pride was leading her down a dangerous path, and there was nothing more I could do to stop it. I asked her if she was still going to Seattle. There was a part of me that hoped she might change her mind, that she might see reason and reconsider. But her reply was a simple, unyielding yes. That one word sealed the deal. I felt a mix of anger and sadness as I blocked her number. It was over. With a heavy heart, I told Ken everything. He was upset but not surprised. His eyes held a sadness that mirrored my own. He said he knew how close Alice and I were, and that he was sorry I'd lost my friend. His empathy was comforting, a small solace in the midst of the turmoil. I told him I was sorry he'd lost his wife, that the woman he had loved and supported had drifted so far from him. You guys were right. I feel like a fucking idiot. Maybe it's a little selfish of me, but I feel betrayed. I had invested so much into our friendship, had stood by her side through thick and thin, only to watch her throw it all away. The sense of betrayal cut deep, leaving a wound that I wasn't sure would ever fully heal. Alice's decision to reconnect with the man who had caused her so much pain was a betrayal, not just of our friendship, but of herself and her daughter. She was undoing all the progress she had made, and it was heartbreaking to witness. I felt powerless, knowing that I had done everything I could and still failed to save her from herself. The memories of our friendship, once a source of comfort and joy, now felt tainted by the recent events. Every laugh, every shared secret, every moment of support and understanding was overshadowed by her betrayal. It was a harsh reminder that sometimes, no matter how much you care for someone, you can't save them from their own choices. As I sat there, processing the end of our friendship, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, disappointment, and a lingering sense of guilt. Had I done enough? Could I have done more? These questions haunted me, even though I knew the answers wouldn't change the outcome. And now I had to live with mine. I just lost a friend, a part of my life. My friend lost his wife, and worst, a kid just lost her mom. No matter how challenging life becomes, there will always be someone willing to extend a helping hand and guide you through your darkest times. Once you find such individuals, it is essential to cherish and maintain those relationships. Additionally, while work plays a vital role in our lives, it is crucial to balance professional responsibilities with family commitments. Your family serves as your sanctuary, a place of solace when external circumstances become turbulent. Failure to strike this balance may result in losing what you hold most dear. Prioritizing both your career and personal life is imperative for long-term fulfillment and stability. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.